Okay, we're now going to talk about directions and positions, and this is page 21 in your trail guide book. Directions and positions are going to help us reference certain areas of the body when we're talking about maybe a structure that's injured or a muscle that is painful. This is more terminology. Now let's go back into the book. And here we are, directions and positions. All right, so we start with superior and inferior. Now these are going to be opposites for the most part. They're going to be given to you in pairs, and they're going to describe directions that are away from one another. So superior is going to be more towards the top of the body. Inferior is going to be towards the feet, okay? They are relative. So all of these directional terms are relative to the part of the body that you are talking about. So I can say that the shoulder is superior to the knee. And I can say that the knee is inferior to the shoulder. But if I'm talking about the elbow, let's say, or the cubital region is inferior to the shoulder. The shoulder is superior to the cubital region or the elbow, okay? So you have to reference a specific body part when you are using these terms. Okay, you just have to have a point of reference. Otherwise, they don't make any sense. All right, so superior, closer to the top of the body, inferior, closer to the feet. All right. Now, we also have the terms cranial and caudal. Cranial, caudal. Quite frankly, cranial and caudal are most often used when describing quadrupeds, not bipeds, because caudal actually means closer to the tail, and humans don't have tails. So caudal in this instance means closer to the buttocks or closer to the gluteal area, or more broadly, closer to the feet. Okay, we do not use caudal very often when we're describing structures in massage therapy. We're going to use superior, inferior, or we're going to use cranial, which specifically means closer to the head or closer to the cranium. Okay, but if we were going to use cranial and caudal, cranial meaning closer to the cranium or closer to the head, we could say that the clavicle is more cranial than the umbilicus or belly button, and that the belly button is more caudal than the clavicle. And that's how we would use those. But like I said, we don't really use these. We don't use those terms so much in massage therapy. All right. So we turn the page and we have another set of opposites. We have posterior and anterior. Anterior is referring to any structure that's closer to the front of the body. Posterior refers to any structure that is closer to the back of the body. We can also use the terms ventral and dorsal. Dorsal and ventral. Dorsal refers to something that's on the posterior side of the body, and ventral refers to something that's on the anterior of the body. Again, typically this is not used in bipeds, more in quadrupeds and fishes. And you're gonna love this. I am the best artist ever. You will. This is your introduction to my artistic ability. Okay, so if we're using ventral and dorsal, ooh, that's terrible. That's a shark. I mean, it's supposed to be a shark. Ooh, okay. And all right, that's a shark. Just go with it. So this is the shark's dorsal fin. And anyone who's ever seen Jaws knows what a dorsal fin is, especially if you played in a pool as a kid and you pretended you were a shark and you made yourself a little dorsal fin and you swam through the water going down it, right? That is a dorsal fin. It's on the dorsal surface of the shark or fish. Actually, they all have them. This is a ventral fin. The front fins are the ventral fins. These are on the ventral surface of the shark. So this is really how ventral and dorsal are used most often. But in humans, ventral is the anterior and dorsal is the posterior. Just imagine a big fin off of your back and you can remember that that's the dorsal surface. See, don't you just love my little shark? Angry shark. Okay, so anterior, closer to the front of the body, posterior, closer to the back of the body. All right, then we have medial and lateral. Again, these are opposites. Medial refers to something that's closer to the midline of the body, and here they have drawn in a midline. It's just the center of the body. Medial, closer to the midline. Lateral, further away from the midline. We do use these quite a bit. Okay, we can use them when referring to parts that are further away. Like for example, the shoulder is more lateral than the nose, right? Because the nose is kind of along the midline, so it's pretty medial. Or we could say, let's say the ear is more lateral to the nose as well. Or switch it around, the nose is medial to the ear. So we're using these terms to describe something that is close to the midline or farther away. Typically, we use medial and lateral in terms of directional movement when we're talking about actions that muscles can do. So a muscle can move a limb medially towards the midline of the body or laterally away from the midline of the body. Next, we have proximal and distal. And again, these are relative, so this is something to keep in mind. Proximal means closer to the trunk of the body. Distal means further away from the trunk of the body. We only use proximal and distal when we're talking about limbs, so the arms and the legs. So in this example, the knee is proximal to the ankle, and the ankle is distal to the knee. We can use this in the arm as well, saying that the elbow is proximal to the wrist because it's closer to the trunk than the wrist is. Or we can say that the wrist is distal to the elbow, meaning it's further away from the trunk than the elbow. You might want to work with proximal and distal a little bit. These are terms that students typically confuse or are a little harder to visualize than some of the others. And then we have superficial and deep. Superficial describes something that is closer to the surface of the body, and deep describes something that is further away from the surface of the body. We use superficial and deep when we're talking about muscle layers. So for example, pectoralis major muscle is superficial. Right under the skin here, you have pectoralis major muscle. Now, the ribs themselves are deep to pec major because obviously they are further away from the surface of the body than pec major is. So that's how we use superficial and deep. We also have different muscle layers within this area. So pec major is superficial to another muscle that would sit right behind it called pec minor. So pec major is superficial to pec minor. So that's how we use that. Or pec minor is deep to pec major. When we talk about the different muscles in an area, we are going to describe where they fit within these layers. So we'll be using these terms quite a bit. Okay, so now it's time to watch the Penguin Prof video on planes and directions. And again, she has lovely graphics and pictures that I don't have access to. And then you have a visible body ebook on planes and directions as well. Have a good day.